Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to be looking at Bitcoin, its valuations against the US dollar, talking about the double peak RSI. Now, I haven't talked about this in quite a while. In fact, I haven't talked about it since I believe $64,000 when Bitcoin reached $64,000. But this is one theory that I had in regards to timing market cycle peaks. But before we get into that, just talking about what's currently happening right now. Bitcoin is up about almost a percent. It seems that we are bouncing off of the 20-day moving average, as you can see here. We closed just above it yesterday, and now we're rallying a bit. Obviously, we're not yet reaching the peaks of where we were prior. So it kind of perhaps indicates some kind of downward trend. But if we were to turn it around, the 20-day moving average is a pretty good place to start. If it doesn't, then as I said in yesterday, that the 20-week moving average will be the next step. And currently, right now, the 20-week moving average is at $42,315. And it would be roughly about an 8% move down, if I recall correctly, 6%, sorry, 10% move down from where we are now. So, we got some wiggle room, but not a lot. But we would like to, but we're not there yet. We're still at the 20-day moving average. That is the moving average to consider. So with that said, let's move on to the double peak RSI. So the first thing we'd want is obviously, getting your RSI indicator here, and then going to the monthly on the BLX. So with that said, don't mind all this. It doesn't really matter. But this is what we want to see, right? We want to see the monthly RSI for Bitcoin. And you can see it has these ginormous swings, okay? Ginormous swings. And we experienced one, right? From 3,000 or so dollars per Bitcoin to about $64,000 per Bitcoin. Around this time, we got to a high of about 61,681 with an RSI peak of 91.73. So, with that said, what do you notice? Don't look at the current cycle, right? I'm gonna just do that. We want to focus on these two. What do you notice? Well, one is, we're peaking out at about 96.63 roughly. Okay, so this is kind of our peak, so to speak, for the RSI, the ceiling. We consistently hit up there every single time. You can also, because it's so, so minute in regards to the differences, you can even connect it to the current RSI peak, and you see a downward trend, slight downward trend. However, you also notice that every cycle there's two peaks on the RSI. And a lot of people are comparing similarities to our current cycle with 2013, and this is another argument for that. In 2013, the RSI came to the high 90s, then dropped dramatically down to 70, then rallied back. Here we have something a little bit more dramatic. We peaked out at about 91.93, dropped down, and now we're on the rebound back. You can also consider the RSI support at here. Some people might say is that there is a support level that's continuing to price up on the RSI and the actual price. So this is what stems my double peak RSI theory. My theory is that Bitcoin for the last hurrah, for the last market peak cycle, for this cycle, the thing that's going to get us to $100,000 Bitcoin or more, is going to be another peak of the RSI to the high 90s. Whether that's going to be 91 or 95, I can't tell you. There could be argument. There are multiple arguments to be had that you could say that it's a downward cycle. Therefore, the next peak, wherever it lands, is going to be slightly lower than the initial peak. Okay, so there's that. How can we? And I think the RSI on the monthly is a pretty awesome indicator. You can really see where the peaks are. They're very pronounced, every single time. So with that said, what will it look like going forward? Well, it depends on time, right? The RSI is dependent on time and how fast the price moves up or down, for that matter. Um, if we have another case of our initial cycle, well, that took roughly, let's see, September to March, about 6 months. Okay, it took us 6 months to move up from, roughly $9,000, $10,000 to $60,000 in that amount of time. Um, if we do something similar in 6 months, so 6 months from June, July, August, September, October, November, December, that is coincidentally the end of the year. Okay. It'll look something like this, which is entirely possible. And this actually is a case that we get a market cycle peak by the end of the year. I would argue that it's going to take a little bit more time, just a little bit more time. As we know, with using the data that we have and see how long it takes for runs to happen over time, they're getting longer and longer. And because of that, I would argue that not necessarily by the end of the year, but sometime in 2022 is my guess on the next market peak cycle. Also determining how fast we go will determine how high we go, right? If Bitcoin moves up very dramatically in the next 6 months, then the price is going to be potentially lower than if it rallied for a year, I would argue, right? Um, that would be another argument to be made because the RSI is sensitive to quick price movements, right? If the price is moving very quickly, the RSI is going to move very quickly, and then we get into extremely overbought territory very quickly, and therefore our price ceiling is going to be a little high, a little lower than before, and this kind of strings back to my little, bar chart pattern like theory, or projection of what it will look like. So you could see that, a 6 month move might look something like this, in which case we get only to, roughly $120,000, or we rally more slower but consistently, and we can see something that goes up to $167,000. And the RSI is going to reflect that as well. Regardless, we should be hitting the high 90s or at least the 90s, for this next market cycle peak. That is my guess. Whenever that time comes, is when you start to get a little antsy, or at least I would start to get a little antsy, starting to really aggressively sell your positions at that point. Not everything in one day, but as long as the price keeps moving up, you're selling a bit more, especially when you get into the 90s on the monthly RSI. Okay, I can't stress that enough. You're not doing this on the daily because I mean, look at this. This is ridiculous. Like you can't do anything on the daily with the RSI. The weekly, maybe I guess you could say. You could see that there's more tops, obviously, but it's not as consistent. When you look at 2013 RSI peaks and then 2017 RSI peaks, they're head and shoulders different from each other. The RSI peaks in 2017 were about in the 80s. Meanwhile, 2013 was in the 90s. The monthly RSI cuts through all of that, and we get to see a consistent peak in the mid 90s for the RSI, or at least the 90s. Okay, if we consider this to be the other peak, which came in at about 91.73. Volatility is dropping over time, which could explain why the RSI peak for this cycle is lower, in which case this is a downward line of resistance on the RSI and will continue to downtrend for the years to come. I mean, we can even project this further down and notice that, by 2034, the potential RSI peak at that time will be about 81.92. But obviously we're not here for that. We're waiting for this current cycle. And so depending on the time, the RSI drops, but that would indicate the price is moving up slower, which to me would insinuate a higher nominal price for Bitcoin. And so that's kind of my outlook for this current cycle. Right now, the RSI is sitting at 66.96. We are far, far away from the market cycle peak, folks. We got time. We got plenty of time to accumulate if you're getting in now, or what have you, or to prepare your positions. We have plenty of time. When we get into the 80s and the 90s, I would say the party is coming to an end, and it's time to be that dutiful house owner, party goer, to kind of shoo everyone away out of your house so you can start cleaning up. But anyway, that's all for today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.